my podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of the book Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news or on social media, the perception given to people is wrong. And my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that doesn't actually exist. I may not agree with everything they said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. And here today, we have John V. Denley, and we're going to talk about dealing with depression as a man. Hi, John.
Hi, Sophie. How you doing?
I'm okay, thanks. You?
Good. Yeah, all good.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, yeah. So as you got my name there, John V. Denley, and my company name is Find Your Fire, although I'm currently transitioning to a brand called Unscramble Your Mind, which obviously fits in with what we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. That came about because I tended to use a Rubik's Cube as a metaphor for the brain. And how when a Rubik's Cube looks all neat and tidy, it's fine, and then you scramble it all up, and then you think, oh God, how am I going to fix this? I don't know how to sort things out. And as you try and fix it, sometimes it makes things worse. And once you learn the rules of how the cube functions, you can solve it yourself by learning the how it works thing. And so that's partly what I do, is I teach people how their brains work so that they can help them solve their own problems, essentially. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I do, and in a nutshell.
Okay, so you've suffered with depression.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, how did it start? Was there an obvious trigger?
Yeah, it was a kind of a long, it's a long story ultimately, and I'll try and do it very quickly here. The background is that I was an IT consultant for a while, but I didn't want to kind of say that because I was an IT consultant, this other stuff happened. Yeah, okay. So as I was an IT consultant, I had a lot of people saying that I was a nerd or a geek and so forth, and I kept on saying, no, I'm really not. That's not my style at all. And it wasn't until much later I realized what that was. But what I was struggling with was social situations. I was really struggling socially to make friends, maintain friends, start relationships. I was really struggling to get a girlfriend, and I felt a bit lonely and isolated. That's the short version of the story. I'm pretty sure I'm waiting for a diagnosis. I have mild Asperger's. It's not really a massive issue, but it means that I sometimes misunderstand social cues, or at least I did in the past. And I didn't understand how things could be offensive in social situations, and the difference between going to a bar with friends and going to a bar with your work colleagues. You know, it's a different dynamic, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And because I didn't know I had this kind of Asperger's things, I didn't understand what was going on. I just thought I was I didn't understand the differences to talk to them better. Oh, sorry, the depression happened because I was of all that stuff. So I was getting isolated and lonely, and I got into a situation where I was phobic of going out. So I had a phobia of talking to girls in social situations because I was getting rejected so often that I stopped going out. So I started isolating myself, and that's when I started looking for a solution to the problem. And so I went up to London to go on a course on how to be better with women. And the first course we did was basically NLP, and it was basically teaching us how our brains work. And what struck me was how different. So there was a room full of sort of 30, 40 men who were struggling with talking to women. And they all had completely different stories as to why they couldn't talk to women. And it fascinated me that they all had these different stories. And that started me on the path of my career now.
What you're doing now, yeah.
I'm doing now, yes.
There wasn't an actual obvious trigger. It was more of a rejection and a drip, drip, drip effect.
Yeah, it was a drip, drip, drip effect. There was a couple of times when there was an actual trigger. I mean, 2012, I had a panic attack, which then triggered a depression after that. But again, I think it was the underlying stuff was already there at that point. It was more of a kind of getting angry with myself scenario. So yeah, I think it was a drip drip kind of effect. I don't think it was anything once. I mean, you could say it was that one night when I went to the pub and then came home crying afterwards. And I thought, I've got to do something about this. I suppose you could say it was that. I got banned for driving because I was so distracted as I was driving along. I got done for speeding 4 times. So I got totting up, and then eventually got banned for 6 months. So you could say that was part of it. It's kind of, it depends how you look at it, really.
It's interesting because for a lot of people, it is a drip drip effect. It is, not always obvious stuff, but as they mount one on top of the other, it just becomes that big issue.
it's a little bit like that weird little saying that people say, is that sometimes to become an overnight success takes 10 years of hard work.
Exactly that. It's a similar, completely similar.
Yeah, it's a lots and lots of little things, and eventually something kind of hits you, and you go, holy heck, how did I get into this position? And then when you look back, it was lots of different things.
And once you obviously were depressed. Would you say that there were certain events in your life that then aggravated the symptoms, or was it just, no, I need to sort this out and block the world, or how did you react? How were you?
That's an interesting point. I think, well, for me, the trigger was always loneliness and isolation, in particular with girlfriend scenarios and situations like that. But there have been 3 or 4 points in my life where I would say, properly suicidal. And they all come from like specific kind of rejection situations where I felt like people didn't want me to be around, or I was bothering people, or I was annoying them in some way, shape, or form, and then that led me to go, well, what's the point of going on if nobody wants me around? I mean, I'm massively broad brushing that situation, but that's just essentially where it was. Sorry, I can't remember what the question was. What we
No, you have answered it, and actually it's made me think of something else. I know that social media has got a bad press for a number of reasons. It also has got some positives as far as I'm concerned. But I think that one of the problems when you are feeling low, when you are feeling lonely, it's not so much the fact that, it's bad about social media, but what is bad is that we're unconsciously being fed all the time that, that person's life's so much better and this other person's got everything that we want. Did you find that?
Well, my depression kind of started before social media really existed. So it was sort of early 2000s. Although actually, now I think about it, actually there was a trigger. No, not really trigger, but kind of online forums and stuff was just starting around the early 2000s.
Like the chat rooms and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of activity in there, and you got propositioned a lot by some very unsavory kind of people, and it kind of made you feel like, what am I? Why am I not? I don't know how to describe it really. It was all a bit of a mess, if I'm honest. So it was all a bit messy, and isolating. And what I was going to say there, but when social media, because I probably should put it into context now, because there's no point in going back and saying, well, this is what the world was like then. It's more like what's the world now, because people are probably struggling now, and a lot of that comes from that social media pressure. And I always say to people that you should be really careful with comparing the line is comparing your behind the scenes footage with everybody else's highlights reels. And in particular, if you look at it and you think to yourself, when I'm looking on Facebook or social media at other people's lives and they look so perfect, you don't know what's going on inside their lives. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes that they're not showing to the world. And if you think about it, you're also not showing the world about your behind the scenes. So that person that you're envious of, that you're looking at and thinking, oh, I wish my life was like theirs, they might be looking at your social media feed and thinking exactly the same thing and thinking, oh my God, I wish my life was like him because his life is perfect. It's ridiculous.
And I think as well, there's a particular member of my family that probably uses social media to stalk me, to find out what apparently I don't say. But I think, something happened this week, a few days ago to one of my best friends. It's something that, the only way I can put it is awful. It's just an absolute tragedy. And that's not on social media.
Yeah.
Because, it's not something that she's prepared to share with the world.
Yeah. And I think that's also a danger as well, because I think one of the questions you wanted to ask me, I'm maybe preempting it slightly here, is about opening up and about how men are kind of by society kind of suggested that they shouldn't show their emotions and so forth, and shouldn't say what's going on. But one of the other things about social media, if you look at the sort of generation gap, is that all the young people these days tend to put lots of stuff onto the media. Their whole life is on there, and they can tell people what's going on. Whereas I don't know how old you are, but my generation, I guess, when I was younger, people didn't know what was going on with us. They didn't know what was going on in our lives. And certainly my parents' generation, they're very skeptical about things that I put online. So I'll put things online about how I've struggled with suicide occasionally, that I've had troubles with my mental health and all this kind of stuff. And other members of the family will see that and then report back and say, oh, did you know and, to my parents about stuff that I'm saying, and then they come back to me and say, "Oh, what did you put that online for? I hope you're not saying anything about us." And that kind of thing can come out. I mean, even now as I'm saying that,
and I think there's also, it's not just the age; it's kind of a cultural kind of side of things. For instance, like being French, the things that are not really being discussed in France, or around the people I know anyway, you don't really talk about money, how much you earn, and you don't really talk about who you vote for.
Yeah.
Where in England or in America, it's something that people are passionate about, and exactly how much they earn and how much they be or who they vote for, whatever. So it's very, it's taking that into account as well, like what you feel that you can and can't say. But going back to men, do you think that this lack of opening up for the, shall we say, the 30 plus as they are now? Do you think it's a bit of a stigma that they shouldn't show that they are vulnerable at times, that they've got to be this strong person all the time and protect?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very, very distinct shift going on in the world now, away from that kind of thinking. I think historically it definitely was that men should be strong, they shouldn't cry, boys don't cry, that kind of programming that we had as children. But it's very much strong shift now happening in the world towards, actually, that's not being strong, that's being weak, that's being cowardly. Being strong is admitting that you've got weaknesses and owning them and feeling strong about them. I think just on the news today, I don't know if you've seen it, but Gareth Thomas has come out, the ex-captain of Welsh rugby team, who a few years ago admitted that he was, okay, you don't know. So anyway, so ex-Welsh rugby captain, I think he was captain anyway, but a few years ago he admitted that he was gay, and that he was like the first professional male rugby player to admit that, I think, along those lines anyway. And today he's come out and said he's got HIV, and he said specifically on his quote today, he said, "This is me showing how strong I am, and this is strength, is to be able to support other people," and so forth. So if you're listening to this in the future, go back and listen to that little initial thing he said about that, because that's exactly what he's saying. Actually, there's a guy on Facebook I saw a few weeks ago who does exactly the same thing. He says, if you're not admitting your weaknesses, then actually you're being a coward, especially if you're not admitting it to your family and your close friends and so forth, the people who are caring about you.
And I would even argue that the issue is that people are not admitting it to themselves. I mean, someone I know, this is really not a good week, really. I lost someone yesterday, he lost his nan, and he refuses to talk about his feelings about it. And I know why. I mean, not that, I'm close to him necessarily or that close, but it's mainly because it takes him back to the death of his dad, which was actually 30 years ago, but that has not been dealt with at all.
He's been holding up.
And that's dangerous. He's carrying this along with him.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's exactly the part of the problem. I was speaking to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying how her husband refuses to talk about his emotions, and it's just driving her insane. And every time something happens, she says, how are you feeling? And he just shuts up and clams up and won't talk about it. And the danger there, of course, is that they get to such a point where they are holding it in so much, and they can't talk to anybody about it, that they find, like, this is where suicide comes into it. The only way that they can relieve themselves of the pain that they're feeling is to commit suicide. And you just think about the pain that you're leaving behind you, and one of the reasons they're not talking about it is because they're worried about upsetting the people around them. It's like, well, if you commit suicide, you're going to be upsetting them a hell of a lot worse than if you actually just talk to them about your feelings. Just talk to them about your feelings, for crying out loud. It's ridiculous. And I was.
So do you think that people are starting, when I say people, I mean men, are starting to wake up to that and maybe be a bit more in touch with a feminine side, for one of better words, and start to open up a little?
I think they are. I mean, I'm not, interestingly, I'm very in touch with my feminine side. I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday. And I actually really struggle to relate to men as a man, because I feel like when I speak to men who are, I guess, proper men, whatever that means really, but typical men, I suppose you could say. They like their football, they like their beer, they like boxing and stuff, and I just don't like any of that stuff. I mean, I like ballroom dancing and cooking and cleaning and shopping and stuff, and I'm like, that's all feminine stuff.
I think that's really interesting here is that because in my previous life I worked with men all of the time, I find it much easier to understand the male psyche and how men work than I do women.
Yeah, and it's because it's because of what you're used to and what you feel comfortable talking to. I get people all the time saying at the moment, John, why don't you go and talk to IT people and work with them and help people who've got like mild Asperger's like you have? And I go, because I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how that works. But when I speak to a woman, somehow I can just click and easily have a conversation and connect with them, and it's just very easy. So I've just said no, I'm not doing it. I'm I'm going to work with mums, and mums in particular as well. I don't know why it is, but when I speak to mums, they have this kind of psyche that I just kind of get, and I can connect with really well, and I can usually help them through that anxiety and that depression that they're struggling with, and to a certain extent, weirdly, conversely to that same argument, they say to me, oh, it's really helpful that you're a man and that you can give me insight into the other men's minds. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not really giving you insight. Well, the interesting thing is I'm not actually giving them insight into the other men's minds. I'm giving them insight into other people's minds and why other people think differently to them. And at the moment you start thinking about, oh, these are my set of beliefs. This is how I've grown up. This is this is how I've been programmed. And you start looking at everybody else and you realize that they've all got different programs. They've all got different stories. They've all got different things going on. It doesn't matter whether they're men or female. They've just got a different story to yours. And that comes back to that initial meeting I had in 2009, where I looked at the room full of men and they all had a different story as to why they were rubbish with women.
And how would you say it has helped you? What were the actual benefits to open up and talk? Just so that if there's a man listening right now saying, yeah, whatever, I'm not doing it. How has it helped you?
I think it's interesting. I'm not sure. It's an interesting point. I think I'm going to have to abstract this slightly and say I think the main benefit of talking about it is that people will come out and help you and support you. I'm not sure if that's necessarily what's necessarily helped me specifically, but I've certainly seen it elsewhere with people who do open up. If you open up, people will go, great, how can I help you? If you don't, people go, what? I can't do anything to help you. I can't do anything.
And I think I'm going to go off track a little bit here, but I think with everything that's being portrayed about the world, we forget that actually people are good, and they have good intentions most of the time. And they want to help. I remember when I had a big operation a couple of years ago, and living here on my own without any family around, I don't like to ask, especially if they're immobile, can't drive, can't do anything. But actually, the number of people who wanted to come and help, who wanted to go shopping, who wanted to come and do my injections, who wanted to this and the other. But you've got to ask. Well, it's quite. If you don't ask, you don't get.
But it's not even necessarily a matter of asking. It's just.
It's saying that you're struggling.
Exactly, and because people is like, it's like if you don't tell them what's happening to you, they can't help you because they don't know what to do. It's not necessarily you asking for them to help. You can just say, here's what's happening with me. This is how I'm feeling, and then the people who could help with that will step forward because they go, oh, I know how you can help with it. I know how I can help with that because then they've got a problem that they can look at and go, oh, I know the solution to that problem. Whereas if you just kind of clam up and don't say anything, they go, well, you're just being an idiot. It's like, I can't help you if you're just going to be an idiot. So, it's allowing people to figure out how they can help you and allowing them to offer to help. And then, really importantly, and actually women are really bad at this, allowing people to help you. I suspect more men about it as well. But I've noticed that the women kind of tend to want to own the problem and fix it for themselves. They don't tend to like.
And I think this is again because of the new dynamics, which is you've got to be superwoman. You've got to have your kids. You've got to have a full-time job. You've got to clean your house. You've got to do this, that, and the other. You've got to be independent. No. Well, yes and no.
Exactly. Be independent when you feel you want to be independent, not when everybody else feels like you.
But not for everything.
Yeah, and actually, this comes back to another one of my classic lines as well, which is turn all your shoulds into can choose tos. So whenever you think to yourself, oh, I should be doing X, Y, and Z, change it into I can choose to do X, Y, and Z, because then that gives you back the power of what you want to do and not what everybody else the whole world thinks that you should do. And actually, it's not even the whole world. It's what you think.
No, it's your perception of what
Exactly.
you
It's what
think
you think the other way, rest of the world wants you to do. So when you say, I should be thinner, you say, well, I can choose to be thinner. You've got power now. You can choose to be thinner if you want to be. But actually, you're probably choosing not to bother. You're probably choosing to eat too much. You're probably choosing to not exercise enough. But that's up to you. It's your choice. You can say, yeah, I'm not going to bother. And so therefore, I'm going to stay as I am.
And I think there's another aspect to it. Most of us always want, if we just stick with that weight thing for a second, which is irrelevant, but I think it highlights.
I was just about to switch back to depression because I suddenly realised we got off topic. But carry on anyway.
But I think it's the same with depression. The issue is we want results now, right? We've always been like that. But with the fact that you can now order something on Amazon and having delivered like 30 minutes later, or same with food, you now want the results now. So if we take the diet, we want the results now. If within a week we haven't lost 2 stones, or same with depression, if within a week we've taken the tablets, nothing's changed, we go, oh, what's the point?
But
actually, it's about, as you just said, it's choosing, because my cat's actually on a diet, right? As I could do with losing a bit of weight myself, I just thought, right, there's no way I'm standing on the scale holding him and being horrified, so I'm going on the diet too. We're doing quite well, but we're not doing it fast. And actually, I'm quite happy with that, because I'm doing it in my own time and I'm still enjoying wine, pizza, or whatever when I want to.
But you're just making better choices at other times. And actually, even when you're choosing to drink the wine and have the pizza, you're saying, you're conscious in your mind, you're going, okay, I am now making the choice to have this pizza, and I'm enjoying it. I'm choosing to enjoy it, as opposed to I can't help myself from eating this pizza, and I should be thinner. It's like you're contradicting yourself, and you're beating yourself up for something that you actually have the power to choose about. It's just whether or not you choose to have the power. And actually, this comes back to depression. This is why I was going to wind it back to depression. And the same thing. So A, you can choose to talk to people about it, and B, there is something you can do about it. But the problem you've got is exactly what you just said there. It's instant gratification versus long-term gratification, or delayed gratification, as the psychologist would say. Is the thing that I'm doing right now helping me right now, or is it something that's going to help me in the future? And can I stick at it long enough for it to have the impact in the future? So when I'm teaching people about how to overcome depression, I talk about my 15 pillars, and I've got a Rubik's Cube that's got the 15 pillars written on it now. That's part of my thing. I think since the last time we spoke, that's been created now. And on there, it's got all the 15 pillars. So it's got things like understand the inner voice, that should that's going on inside your head. Understand your breathing. So if you can practice that, do a gratitude exercise, which you do every single night. You have to do it for weeks and weeks and weeks before it has an effect, because it's like changing a habit. All of this is habits. We've got certain habits that we've got into, and we need to change the habits. Well, actually, it's the study was that it's a minimum of 21 days to change a habit, but actually the average is 66 days, and sometimes it can be even longer, because essentially all you're doing is you're getting the point about changing a habit is it's the point at which it becomes a new habit, which is when you've changed the habit. So once it feels odd to not do the habit anymore, that's when you've changed the habit. And if you haven't got to that point yet, you haven't changed the habit, because if you fall back into your old habits again, there you are, you're back in your old habits again.
And with that in mind, do you think that we can all do something to improve mental health issues?
Yeah, totally, absolutely, definitely. Now there's always there's a medical proviso here, of course, or whatever the correct term is for this. You always talk to your medical professional about taking medication or drugs, and your current individual situation. Always talk to your medical professionals. Don't just listen to people like me and do stuff based on what you're hearing from me. However, what you can do is you can do all the stuff that I'm suggesting that you do, and then go back to your medical professional and say, do you know what? I don't feel like I need to be taking these drugs anymore. Can I stop? And then take that decision later on. So what I'm saying is that we can all do this thing, and I do this thing, and it's a bit of a visual thing, so it's kind of hard over a podcast. But we have up days and down days. Basically, we have this sort of average level of sort of happiness in our lives. We have a good day, then we have a bad day. We have a good day and a bad day. It's not necessarily days. It could be hours. It could be months. Whatever. It could be weeks. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You have an up period and then a down period. and the average is kind of in the middle of those ups and downs. And that's just life, because they say that when you look at a heartbeat in a thing, it goes beep, 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 and it goes up and down. And the moment you see a line that's steady, beep, you're dead. It's not good. So you need the ups and downs to make life interesting and exciting and fun. But what you can do is you can raise that average level of happiness. You can bump it up. So that this is something that Tony Robbins once taught me, which is if your level of happiness is at a certain level, and you choose, like we said before, you choose to raise the bar and become averagely more happy, then your new bad days will be better than your current good days. And you go, why wouldn't you want to do that? Of course you would want to do that. That's ridiculous. So
at the same time, I think that sometimes when we are having a bad day, and I think there is a fine line, but if we're having a bad day, sometimes you do have to stick with it, so to speak, as opposed to trying to shift it. You've got to understand why it's happening, feel the pain, and then move on. But you mustn't stay in the pain for too long. That's the issue. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people do. They then start, reassuring themselves that life is crap. And
that's exactly it. It's that positive, that negative reinforcement. And what we need to try and do is turn that into positive reinforcement instead, because we're as humans, we're wired to look for negativity. We're wired to look for danger. We're wired to look for things to try and keep us safe. And often change is the thing that's difficult. And what I was saying about the bad days is that when you drop down into a bad day, that's fine, because if you're looking at it, you're looking at trying to come out of that bad day and then having a good day at some point in the future, or a good period at some point in the future. But the problem is sticking down there in the bottom and letting that slide down into even further depths and deeper down into depths.
And it cycles, isn't it? Up or down. You can cycle right up, because the happier you are, the more you see happy things, the more blah blah blah, and the worse you feel, the worse you get.
And if you have a period of really, really happiness for a long period of time, and then suddenly you have a down day, it can feel really horrible, because it's compared to what you've been used to, it's a miserable day all of a sudden. And you go, oh yeah, it's all right, because it's just about it. I had a bad day yesterday. Actually, it was Friday afternoon. I started to feel. Actually, it was Friday morning. I woke up feeling a bit bleh, and I kind of pushed through Friday, and it was all right. But I woke up on Saturday morning. I think, oh, I just can't be bothered anymore. And I spent Saturday yesterday chilling out, basically watching the cricket, watching the golf on TV, and just really doing nothing, not trying to do anything. And I woke up this morning going, I feel better. So I kind of allowed myself to have a day.
Sometimes you mustn't push too hard. We forget to listen to the signs that say, no, just take that bit of time for yourself. And I know that's easy said and done sometimes, with work, with kids, with this, with that. But it doesn't have to be an entire day necessarily. It's just making sure you have something for you.
And when I'm teaching people the 15 pillars thing, it's a 24-hour process. Well, I say 24 hours. It can be a 48-hour process, depending on where you're struggling. Because the first bit of it might be just take the rest of the day off. It could be as simple as that, and then start from tonight. So if I was feeling miserable this morning, I might just say, right, let's go right off Saturday to Sunday. I'm going to start tonight. I'm going to start the process tonight. I'm going to look at my inner voice. I'm going to do my breathing. I'm going to do my gratitude exercise. I'm going to do some meditation and mindfulness tonight. Then I'm going to go to sleep. And then tomorrow morning, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to listen to some music that's going to get me up and dancing. I'm going to do a bit of exercise and get outside into nature and take a few deep breaths. And I'm going to eat some good food. And then tomorrow is going to be a good day, because I've planned for it to be a good day. And these are my 15 pillars. I just ran through 10 of them right there.
So I'm going to ask you a bit of a controversial question. We're obviously more aware about mental health issues nowadays. But do you think that sometimes, in light of everything we've just said, people actually hide behind the label of being depressed instead of trying to sort it out and actually take responsibility for their own lives?
I'm not sure I'd necessarily call it hiding, but it's kind of what I was saying before about it's easier to stay stuck than make the change. It's easier just to carry on the way I'm been going on than to make the change. It's a comfort zone thing. Again, it's a very visual thing, and I would normally get a couple of I've got them on the video that we're watching at. I've got little hula hoops here that I use for a thing like this. Imagine a hula hoop on the floor, and you're standing in the hula hoop, and this is your depression little hula hoop, and then somebody throws a hula hoop down next to it, and you say, this is a good life, this is a happier life, or this is a better life than where you are now, and you kind of step into it. But then it feels really uncomfortable because it's new and it's different and it's dangerous. And then you just step back into the old one again. You go, oh, thank God, I'm back where I was again. And so it's hard to make that transition. But again, it becomes that choice that we were saying a little earlier on as well. If you can choose to make the changes and consistently make small changes over a period of time, the difference will start coming eventually down the line. So it's very easy just to sit there and go, I'm depressed, as you say, and this is what it's going to be, and this is how it's always going to be, because it's an easy choice to make. What's a more difficult choice to make is I'm going to do something about it, which is exactly what I did in 2012. So when I had that panic attack in 2012, and and actually I posted a great thing on Facebook, and I was telling my whole life story, and I said, and so I had this really bad thing, and the doctor prescribed me antidepressants, and then I recovered, and then I had a really bad day, and then the doctor prescribed me antidepressants, and then I had a really bad day again, and the doctor prescribed me antidepressants, and I thought, no, this is it. I've had enough of this now. I don't want to be on these antidepressants anymore. I want to find a way of getting off these and so forth. Now, luckily at the time, the doctor had also prescribed me go on CBT courses and mindfulness courses. So I did those in the same year. But I also met with a few different people, had a few people I could call on. But I basically spent a lot of time working out what you need to do to recover, and then started implementing them. And obviously that's where I got to the point now of this having these 15 pillars concept, to help me to not have to be on the antidepressants anymore, because I made the choice that I didn't want to be depressed anymore.
No, exactly. Believe it or not, we're getting towards the end of our time already.
Amazing.
But I just want to ask you one last question. Yeah. Do you have any regrets? Is there something you wish you'd done sooner to deal with that depression, do you think?
The simple answer is yes. I wish I'd figured out the things that I know now, probably 5 years before I did. Now, I don't think, because if you look back, it was kind of a 10-year period. I sort of started struggling with depression in sort of 2001-ish, and it was 2012 when I started to, so it was 11 years between sort of first bit of depression and actually doing something about it. So I'd say 5 years before that, I think I probably could have taken on board the information and done something about it. But if I'd gone back 5 years before that, I don't think it would have sunk in. I don't think it would have felt like it was.
I was just about to say, do you think that it's a journey, and that sometimes, you know, I mean, there's certain things that I wish I'd done 5 years ago, but actually I probably was not in the right place, and that you had to follow the path?
Yeah, I would say partially, yes. But, and the difference is that if you can find somebody who can show you the path, and you're willing to listen to them, and you're willing to make the choices, then you can make the changes much earlier. So, for example, if I'd met somebody in those early days and said, "Hey, John, I can see you feeling depressed. Here's a path out of it. Here's how to have a wonderful life. Just do this. Just do these 10 things, or these 15 things in my case, and things will be better." I think I probably would have gone, "Yeah, okay, well, that sounds good." And if they'd explained it to me the right way.
This is the thing. You know, there's so many people that, I mean, I see it in the coaching that I do. You know, you have a chat and they're like, "Oh, it's too much money. I'll figure it out by myself." Figuring it out by yourself means that, you know, in 5 years' time, you're probably still going to be in the same place. Sometimes you do need someone to take your hand and drag you through it, and then you're 3 months later.
Yeah, because it all comes down to no. Actually, somebody did a really cool analogy a while back. Yeah, so it's like when you walk into a dark room, you know that if you reach around to the side of the wall, there'll be a switch there that you can turn on to turn the light on. You just know that. And it's like a coach will, and exactly, but it's like in life, if you walk into a dark room and you don't know where the light switch is because you've never walked into a dark room before, and you can't find it because you can't see it. But if a coach was to say to you before you walk into the room, as you walk into the room on the right hand side, about halfway up, you'll find there's a switch. If you switch that, the light will come on. You go, "Oh, cool, that was easy." It's a big difference.
Funny you should say that, because if this is a story that happened to me a few years ago and actually completely represents what we've just said, I went into a hotel room and I was looking for the light switch, which, as far as I'm aware, should be to the left of the right of the door. Seems quite obvious. Yep. Yeah, can't find it. Did the wall in the dark, and eventually found the switch, so I pressed it. I knew it wasn't. It was a fire alarm.
Exactly.
Right, so the entire hotel now is flashing and buzzing. But this is exactly the same thing, isn't it? Yep. Because if you're trying to figure it out on your own, you might press the wrong switch.
and it'll take you ages to find the right switch. Exactly. And it's exactly the...
Yeah, and then you have to run to go and tell them it's not a real fire, it's just you being a muppet.
It was you, the stupid hotel, put the light switch in the wrong place. And actually, weirdly, it does seem to be bathrooms that do that, isn't it? Because a lot of time it's like a pull cord. And if you reach for the switch, there isn't a switch because it's a pull cord, and you don't see the pull cord straight away. Anyway, yes. But like you said, if they'd given you instructions before you walked into the bathroom and you was to where the light switch is, you wouldn't have had that problem in the first place. So I think that's a brilliant place to finish.
I know. John, thank you so much again for your time today. For everybody else, if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.